A lot of Atlanta Braves players are coming off career years, which means there could be some regression for those players and the Braves offense. We'll talk about the biggest regression candidates for the Braves and whether or not it makes a difference for the impact on this offense. We'll discuss all that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I am your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. And make sure you check out my written work over at BravesToday.com. Got an article that went up on a Thursday, kind of corresponding article to what we're going to talk about today, looking at what it would take for the Braves not to make the postseason. So make sure you go ahead and check that out if you haven't already. Make sure you follow the social media account or the podcast on social media at LockedOn_Braves. We'll have our mailbag podcast on a Friday. I will submit out a tweet on a Friday afternoon asking for those questions. So be ready to submit your questions to there. I know I have other people that send me questions in other places like Twitter DM, email, stuff like that. Try to include those, but honestly, I look at the questions from that tweet, so make sure you submit those there. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube if you're new, approaching 9,000 subscribers, trying to get to 10,000 by opening day. So if you can do that, if you haven't already, I would really appreciate it. You can help others find this podcast by hitting that thumbs up button, that like button on this video. I would really appreciate that. If you're listening on the audio version, make sure you leave me a 5-star review. Thank you so much for all your support here at Locked On Braves. We got Matt Jacobs in here tonight, Pat Stockton, Dave McIntyre, AK, Chris Hester, Nick Harvey, Rich Gunderlock, who said got here just in time. Waiting on you, Rich. Jeffrey Humphreys, Frankie Torres, Alan Daniel, and DZ Rex in here live. DZ said he's live for once as well. Thank you. Glad you make it. Do a lot of these podcasts live during the off season, starting around 9 Central, 10 Eastern. You want to be a part of that. Today's episode, we are going to look at the biggest regression candidates for the Atlanta Braves, talk a little bit about what that could mean for this offense and what type of impact that could have. We'll discuss all that. Before we do, though, I want to remind you today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. All right, on today's episode, like I said, we're going to be looking strictly at regression candidates. Last year, the Braves offense in particular, we're going to be focusing on position players. I'll touch on pitchers later in the podcast, but really this is going to be focused on the position players because last year, Braves offense, as you know, at least during the regular season, 4-game sample size in the postseason didn't go as we hoped, but in the regular season, it arguably could have been one of the best offenses, if not the best offense ever in the history of baseball. A 500 team slugging percentage. Never been done. It was an absolutely incredible output from this Braves offense like we've never seen before. And it was a lot of fun to watch. But a lot of players overachieved in many different ways, set career highs. Looking at the StatCast data for a lot of these players, it wasn't luck. You won't find a lot of these guys who are just super lucky. In fact, you look at Ronald's numbers, and I'm not going to talk about him as a regression candidate because I think he can do exactly what he did last year again. But you look at Ronald's metrics, and he underperformed his expected metrics. So it wasn't a lot of flukiness. There wasn't a lot of luck involved necessarily in what the Braves did last year. It's just they were so good, it's really hard to see these players repeating a lot of these numbers. I see Mike Gregg saying Matt Olson and Marcell Ozuna, top 2 candidates as well. That's what I got at the top of my list. So thank you, Mike. Thanks for looking at my notes here ahead of time. But number 1 that I do have on my list is Marcell Ozuna. Look, this is a guy who was unplayable for 2+ years. You know, the past 2 years and the first month of 2023, he was unplayable. I mean, he kept playing because of the contract, but it was not great. You were not getting much of anything from Marcell Ozuna. And then from May on last year, he was one of the best hitters in all of baseball. Certainly the best DH, although somehow he didn't get the Silver Slugger award at DH, but he was one of the best players in baseball. He had a career high 40 home runs. It was his highest OPS in a full season since 2017, the second highest of his career for a full season. His 2020 numbers are insane, but as we know, that was a very short sample size. It was a career year in a lot of ways for Marcell Ozuna, a guy who had been just awful the past 2 years, to the point where it would look like he was going to get cut very soon into the 2023 season. And look, I was very vocal even before all of the stuff on the field, just because of the stuff off the field. I was very vocal about the Braves possibly needing to cut him. And again, even through April last year, many people were talking about Marcell Ozuna needing to be cut. And all of a sudden, this guy turned it around. So is there a difference there? Is this the Marcell Ozuna we can expect going forward into his age 33 season? That seems highly unlikely. You look at the projections for him, they have him hitting around 30 home runs with an average around 255. That would be a pretty big drop from where he was last year, where he hit 275 and had 40 home runs. That's a pretty big decrease in output. Still really, really good. I think most people would take 30 home runs and a 250 plus average from Marcell Ozuna in the DH spot. So still not bad, but again, was so good last year, you got to expect that he's going to take somewhat of a step back. Only thing I will say, and I've made this point about Ozuna, and I made this point all last year while he was going good. And before that, I'll go back even before that, when I talked about how bad Ozuna was and the fact that Braves need to get rid of him. My point then always was, if you put him in the lineup for 500, 600 at bats, I maintain, I think he can get you 25 to 30 home runs. My biggest issue with Ozuna during all that is he gave you nothing else. He wasn't walking. He wasn't taking his hits, just wasn't, shooting the ball the other way every now and then. Not that he's necessarily that type of hitter, but it was home run or bust. It felt like with Ozuna, there was nothing in between. And I saw changes in that at the end of last year. Plus, you look at the metrics for him, 16.6% barrel rate. Now, that was a career high. So, again, that's one of those things that is likely going to step back a little bit, but it was earned. I mean, a 16.6% barrel rate is elite. A 283 expected batting average. That was actually higher than his 274 batting average. So, again, he didn't outperform his expected stats. His expected slug was 581, which was higher than his 558. So, just looking at the expected stats, they wouldn't tell you necessarily that he's looking to take a step back. There was nothing fluky about what Marcell Ozuna did last year. It's just hard to imagine that he's going to have another career year going into his age 33 season. But the biggest thing for me with Marcell Ozuna, again, like I said before the outbreak that he had last year, is what is he going to give you outside of just the home runs? Is he going to be able to hit a little bit for average and take his hits every now and then? Is he going to be able to take his walks? Last year, he got his walk percentage back up to around 10%. Can he do more for you other than just slug? And last year, after April, he proved that he could. So I'm not expecting, and I'm not predicting Marcell Ozuna to fall flat on his face, but I'm not expecting him to hit 40 home runs again. I'm not expecting him to hit 280. But I think he could hit 260 and hit around 30 home runs, and that's still really, really good for Marcell Ozuna. Next one up on the list is Matt Olson. And again, as Pat Stockton said, you can't expect 50-plus home runs from Matt Olson. And that's kind of where I am. 54 home runs last year. It's just really hard to expect somebody to do that 2 years in a row. It's very rare that somebody is able to do that 2 years in a row. That's 15 more home runs than his previous high. He scored 26 more runs than his previous high, and he drove in 28 more runs than his previous high. He blew his career numbers out of the water. 283 average was 12 points higher than his previous high in batting average. Just repeating those numbers alone just does not seem possible. Just because those numbers were ridiculous. And in many seasons, he could have won the MVP. Maybe even the year before, he would have won the MVP with those numbers. Really hard to expect him to be able to do that again. Projections have him hitting around 40 home runs, 100 runs, 110 runs batted in between a 265 and a 270 average. Again, still really, really, really good. You're talking about a 40 and 100 guy batting somewhere between 260 and 270. That's still really, really good. You just can't expect another 50 home run, 120 RBI season like that. You just don't project that for players, even the best of players. But like Ozuna, there's nothing in the StatCast data to suggest that he was unlucky. A 16.4% barrel rate, again, another elite barrel rate for him. A 264 expected batting average. That is more in line with his projections, and that's lower than his actual number. I do expect the batting average to come down a good bit. 558 expected slug. That is a good bit lower than his actual 604 slug. So the expected numbers for Olson do kind of point to some regression coming. But again, even if you didn't see those expected numbers, you got to imagine it's going to be really hard for him to repeat what he did last year and what was a career year. And not just a career year by a little bit. He destroyed his career highs in many, many categories. Now, he did increase his average exit velocity and hard hit percentage. So getting to the baseball more and making more quality contact more often certainly is going to help. He did have the highest walk rate, and he really cut down on the strikeouts after the first month. First month of the season, the strikeouts were a bit ridiculous. Really cut down on him after that, and it finished around his career norm of 24%. So again, for Olson and Ozuna, they are obvious regression candidates, but it's regressing to still really, really good numbers for really, really good players. And that's how I see it for both of those guys. I have two other regression candidates I want to talk about on the infield and on Ozzy Albies and Orlando Arcia. We'll discuss those two here next. You shouldn't have to worry when you go out and buy tickets to your next big event. Maybe you're going to the big game this coming up weekend. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They have killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, which I don't buy tickets unless I see what my view is going to look like, and you can do that right in the app. They have their best price guarantee. Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. That's where I will be going to get my Braves tickets this year, just like I did last year, and you can too. And you can use our code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase there using the Gametime app. All-in prices, show your total up front. I hate when you go to checkout and then all of a sudden it throws in all of these fees. Gametime gives you that price up front right there. They have exclusive flash deals as well, right up to the game time and sometimes after the game started as well. And then they also have their Gametime guarantee, which means if you find tickets in the same section in the same row for less, they will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. I want to remind you, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now you can get on Amazon Fire as well. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Now, tomorrow we'll have our mailbag podcast. And then on Monday, we're going to be looking at the top prospects at the college level as the college baseball season starts next week. And I cannot wait. Weather's not looking great at the moment, but we will have some baseball action to watch and some prospects. I'll give you some prospects to keep an eye on. Also want to apologize to our sponsor, Gametime. I had the wrong ad up during that read, so throwing it up on the screen now. Make sure you use the code LOCKEDON for $20 off at Gametime. All right, let's get back into our regression candidates. Ozzy Albies is next on my list. Career high 33 home runs last year, hit 30 in 2021, highest average in on base since 2019. I take 2019 numbers with a huge grain of salt. He's one that StatCast doesn't love and never really has because he doesn't make consistent hard contact. 266 expected batting average and 467 expected slug is much lower than his actual 280 batting average and 513 slug from 2023. So expected numbers right off the bat would tell you that there's some pretty hard regression expected for Ozzie Albies. That said, he typically outperforms his projections. But all the other data is pretty much in line with his career norms. A 7% barrel rate is about what he normally does. 88 mile per hour average exit velocity, 17% strikeout rate, a 7% walk rate. He's not somebody that's going to walk a lot. He also doesn't strike out a ton. He's going to put the ball in play. But, he just goes through these streaks of ups and downs, it feels like. His 39% hard hit rate in 2023 was the hardest of his career and above his career average of 33. So that is one stat there, and that's a big difference, a 6% difference there in hard hit rate. Certainly would help the numbers that you saw. Ozzie is one I could see falling back to, 260 average, 310 on base, 450 slug with closer to mid-20 home runs. Again, still a really good player, mid 700s OPS type of player. Projections have him at around 27 home runs, a 270 average, 330 on base. That on base just seems, if Ozzie has another 330 on base year, I will be ecstatic. He is not somebody that's typically put up high on base season. So I would love to see him back in that 330 range for a second straight year, but history just tells me that's not very likely. Projections also have him with an 810 OPS. So projections are actually a little bit higher on Ozzie than maybe what the metrics tell you. Regardless, he's a top 10 second baseman. Again, none of these players I'm talking about regressing. I'm saying you're going to fall off the face of the earth. I still think they're going to be really, really good players. It's just last year they were all so good. You just can't expect that 2 years in a row. So I still love Ozzie, but I could see him taking maybe the biggest step back of any of these players and being more, like I said, 260, 310, mid-20s home runs. And somebody I'd like to see run a little bit more. I'd love to see him be a 2020 candidate. Both him and Michael Harris, I hope they run a lot more in 2024. One thing with Ozzie, though, I'm hoping to see some progression on defense. No matter what happens offensively, like I said, I think he could take a step back. I'm hoping to see some improvement on defense because it was not great for Ozzie last year. Maybe the shoulder, had something to do with it. Maybe the shift going away exposed his lack of range a little bit, but I'm really hoping to see some improvement for Ozzie on defense. Little E saying the Wizard of Ozzie will be just fine. I think he's going to be a really good player. Once again, all-star caliber, but he is somebody just because of the volatility in his profile. I could see him, taking a big step back. Orlando Arcia is the next one for me. And I think we saw some of this regression already happen in the second half of last year, but he had a career high in home runs and OPS last year. But overall, the numbers weren't that far off from his career averages. He was just league average offensively last year with a 99 WRC plus and a 740 OPS. I could see him dropping to, below average offensive player, around a 90 WRC plus and a low 700 OPS. And that's where a lot of the projections have him. So I think we all kind of understand Arcia overperformed in the first half last year, underperformed in the second half last year. It kind of met in the middle and it looked like a typical Orlando Arcia season. But I think we could see him maybe take even a little bit more of a step back overall and be more of a, below average offensive player. And look, if he's batting 7th, 8th, or 9th in this lineup, that's fine. But he's one I could see as well, taking a little bit of a step back. And then what are we doing with shortstop in the future if that's the case? I definitely don't think, hopefully I eat these words, I don't think there's more. I don't think there's another gear for Orlando Arcia. I think we've seen the best of him, which may be unfair as he's just kind of coming into his prime now. I believe going into his age 29 season. So maybe that's a little bit unfair to say of Orlando Arcia, but it's just hard to project him being any better than he was last year. And he had an expected batting average of 247, an expected slug of 398. he really overachieved in a lot of ways last season. So I'm expecting him to have some regression as well. 3 players I didn't talk about: Austin Riley, Ronald Acuna Jr., Sean Murphy. I mean, there's a chance that these guys regress some because they all had good seasons, but I'm very high on all of them either repeating or exceeding their numbers from 2023. Riley and Murphy in particular are 2 guys that I think are going to have huge seasons. Acuna, it's hard, really, really difficult to see him outperforming what he did last year, but I also put no limitations on Ronald Acuna Jr. and what he is capable of doing. So that's why I don't really talk about either of those 3 regressing at all. I think all of them have a chance to be as good, if not better, than they were last year. On the pitching side of things, there's nobody there to mention. Like, who do you have regressing from the pitching staff last year? Strider underperformed his metrics in just about every way, especially with ERA. Mord was pretty much on par. It's not like he was anything spectacular. Elder's second half regression kind of normalized his numbers. Maybe you could say that his overall numbers take a step back from where they were, but I think the second half really kind of evened all of that out. Sales metrics actually show that he underperformed last year in the innings that he threw. So I think there's a chance for him to, improve upon what he did last season. I won't get into relievers. I see Doc's cards mentioning Minter. There's certainly a chance for some relievers, Iglesias even, to have some regression and step back. It's just you start getting into relievers like that and it gets a little bit muddy. Relievers in general are year for year to me. I don't trust them year to year. This Braves bullpen is great on paper. And look, you try to build the best bullpen that you can. And I think the Braves have done that, and they have guys who have done it in the past, and then I feel like you can trust. But again, relievers are just so finicky to me. I say it all the time. They're somewhat year to year and have a pretty quick leash on some of those guys. So certainly some of them could regress. And as JK said, going back to Charlie Morton, he's entering his age 40 season. I mean, how much can you really expect him to improve on what he did? I think there is regression for him that we've seen the last 2 years, and I think that probably continues this year. But I mean, he is your 4th starter. I like Charlie Morton. I think he's going to be fine, but certainly not expecting him to underperform what he did last year, because I don't think that was necessarily spectacular, but I also don't think he's going to just overperform it either. And then finally, I wanted to talk about what would it take regression wise for this offense to still not be good. And this was kind of what I mentioned in the article over on bravestoday.com. You want to go check it out. I talked about what it would take for this Braves team not to make the postseason. What would it take for them not to win 85 games? Regression was one of those things, but even if all these players I talked about today regressed, you're still regressing back to really, really good players. And the Braves offense was so good in 2023 that even if they take a step back, even if all these players I talked about take a step back, this is most likely still a top 5 offense, if not still the best offense in baseball. You look at the numbers from last year, there was a 50-point gap in OPS between the Braves and the next best team. They could shave 49 points off their OPS and still lead all of baseball in that category. They had a difference of 58 home runs last year from the next best team and a 13-point edge in batting average. They could shave off 49 points of OPS, 57 home runs, and 12 points of batting average and still lead baseball last year in all of those categories. There's a real chance that several players that we talked about and maybe others regress for the Braves this year, and this offense could still be really, really good. So again, yes, there's regression coming. There has to be. Everybody put up career years last year. You can't expect them to do that again or even overperform those numbers, but it's still going to be a really, really good offense and a really, really good team regardless. All right, next, I want to get into a little bit of news, including Jesse Chavez not coming back to the Braves, at least for now. We'll discuss that here next. It is the Super Bowl coming up this weekend. Happy Super Bowl to all those who celebrate here from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday it's really all about just getting together with family, watching the commercials, eating some junk food, and waiting till the end to celebrate the start of baseball season. But FanDuel gives you many other ways to get in on the action and enjoy the Super Bowl. And you can hopefully get some more W's at the end of the football season. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. Again, maybe you're a casual fan like me. You've watched maybe 2 quarters of NFL football this year. You don't know enough about the actual teams and players. You can bet on the coin toss. You can bet on the color of Gatorade that's going to be poured on the winning coach. There are so many options for you to get in on the action for Super Bowl Sunday coming up. And new customers join today, and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Also visit FanDuel.com/PlaySafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, or you can check it out over on Amazon Fire as well. Subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Tomorrow on the podcast, we'll have our mailbag episode. It's my favorite podcast of the week. You always come up with outstanding questions. Look for my tweet from @LockedOn_Braves to submit your questions to be answered on that episode. And then on Monday, our Miners Monday episode, we're going to look at the college prospects you need to keep an eye on. Braves really need to continue to beef up this farm system. Who could be some college prospects that they could be drafted in the upcoming draft? We'll talk about that on Monday's episode. A little bit of news from Thursday. We don't know where the A's are playing in the future. That still seems to be a little bit up in the air right now. Poor Oakland fans or A's fans. I don't even know. I don't know what city claims the A's right now, but that is still up for debate, I guess, or discussion. Rob Manfred, in also talking about the A's situation, introduced a streaming package that would include half the league. You already have MLB.TV. I guess I don't understand the difference in the streaming package and what that does. I just do away with blackouts. Just keep MLB TV and do away with blackouts. So it makes me a little bit nervous that they're creating a different type of streaming package than what they already offer for every team with MLB TV. So keep an eye out for that. I know everybody's curious of what the landscape of television looks like for baseball going forward. Sad news, Jesse Chavez signed a minorless deal with the White Sox. White Sox are looking to build a very, very poor man's Braves team over there. So keeping an eye on the White Sox this year, if no other reason, just to cheer for some former Braves players like Michael Soroka and many others. Braves are probably just going to trade for him later in the offseason or later in the season anyway. He's going to come over and help take the Braves to a World Series. But Jesse Chavez not coming back to the Braves. Very surprising. I thought if he was going to come back at all, he'd do so in a Braves uniform. And then The Athletic gave grades for the offseason. They gave the Braves a C, which is interesting. But, I'll give my offseason grade for the Braves later. I kind of already gave one, but I'll give an official one once everybody is signed. There's still some big free agents out there, so it seems a little early to do offseason grades. But Braves right now getting a C from The Athletic. That's passing, I guess, not with flying colors. 48 days until opening day. I want to start counting it down on here and talking about some Braves players who wore that particular number for the day. Chadwick Tromp is the current owner of number 48, or he was in 2023. We'll see if he wears the same this upcoming season. Ian Anderson wore number 48 in 2020. Pablo Sandoval wore number 48 with the Braves. He was vital in the Braves winning that 2021 World Series. Tommy Hanson, rest in peace. And then Ralph Garr actually wore it the most from 1968 to 1975. 48 days until opening day. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks so much for joining me here live. I see Little Lee, Pat Stockton, Trey Alexander, Jeffrey, JK, Argenis, and Monty 2K in here with me till the end. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Ecuadorman saw you in there as well. Thanks so much being a great everydayer here on the podcast. If I didn't get to your comment or question, please put it down below in the comment section on YouTube, and I'll try to get to it there. But we'll have our mailbag episode tomorrow. Miners Monday coming next week. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Braves if you haven't already. Trying to get to 10K by opening day. If you haven't already, hit the like button on this video. If you're listening on audio, go over to YouTube, hit the subscribe button, the like button as well. I appreciate it. And make sure that you leave me a 5-star review wherever you listen to Locked On Braves. And finally, make sure you follow us on social media at shortstopball and at LockedOn_Braves. And we will talk to you next time.